All right, so in this video, we are going to talk about the rise of Adolf Hitler. Okay? And he was actually not born in Germany. He was born in what was then the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. But many Austrians were of German descent. Okay, so he's an ethnic German. Fairly unremarkable childhood. He was born to a middle-class family. His father was a government official. He and his father didn't get along very well at all. He got along well with his mother, though. Uh, there was nothing particularly special or unique about him. He was a fairly average student, and his first life goal was to become an artist. This is one of his watercolors. As a young man, he even traveled to Vienna and applied to the Vienna School of Art, very prestigious art school, and he was denied. It's one of those big what ifs of history. What if he would have been accepted? Would he have just become a mediocre artist? We'll never know. He really struggled in Vienna. He sold hand painted postcards on the street corner to tourists just to get by. He usually had very little money. Hitler said his time in Vienna was important, though, because that's where he learned about the politics of race, anti Semitism, and nationalism. Now, we don't know that for sure. Anything Hitler says, you always have to take with a grain of salt, particularly about his early childhood. But Vienna was a hotbed of racism and anti Semitism and nationalism. So that could be very true. And then World War I began, and Hitler got a special exemption and was allowed to join the German army. That's him on the left of the screen with the X above his head. And he actually was a good soldier. He was quite brave. He earned a medal, would often volunteer for dangerous missions. And Hitler said it was during World War I where he realized that he had a special fate or destiny, because he said that one night in the trench, he and his comrades were eating dinner, and Hitler said he felt compelled, almost like a voice was telling him, to pick up and move further down the trench. And so he did, and not long after that, a mortar shell fell into the trench and exploded, killing his comrades, but he was safe since he moved. Now, whether or not that actually happened, who knows? Even if it did happen, could just be a coincidence, but Hitler's going to view it from a perspective of, I am special, I have some sort of destiny. Near the end of the war, Hitler was caught in a poisonous gas attack, and it left him temporarily blinded. He was sent to a hospital, and it was while blind in the hospital that he learns that Germany has surrendered, and this crushed him. He did not understand. See, the Allies never stepped foot on German soil itself during World War I. They would have. It was inevitable. Germany was going to lose. But from Hitler's perspective, he was saying, well, how could we surrender? They never even stepped foot in Germany. So he and many others began to believe in the myth of conspiracy, that Germany was betrayed from within by weak-willed politicians and Jews and communists. It was their fault that they lost, not the good, pure German people. And after the war, he was jobless once again and aimless, and he was actually hired by the German government to spy on this new political party, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. This is what it looks like in German, and you can see how they get the Nazi from the first word, the NA and the ZI there. So he's hired to spy on the Nazis. He's not the founder of the Nazi Party. He did not create the Nazi Party. He was actually hired to spy on the Nazi Party. And he begins to go to their meetings that take place in the back of a beer hall. That's where many political parties met throughout Germany. And he likes what he hears. These are his people. Many of them are ex-soldiers. They're all nationalists. They're anti-Semitic. They are racist. And he begins to give speeches. And that's when he learns his true skills, not an artist, but it's the gift of public speaking. And under his influence, the Nazi Party begins to grow in number, largely inspired by the Italian fascists. Just like the Italian fascists had their own private militia, the black shirts, the Nazis have their own private militia, nicknamed the Brown Shirts, or the SA. The story goes that they chose brown shirts because they found a stockpile of them, basically, and got them real cheap. And the SA, like the Italian fascists, just like the black shirts, the SA, the brown shirts began to, attack German communists and fight in the streets. Once again, inspired by the Italian fascists. And a year after Mussolini successfully took over Italy, Hitler's going to try the same thing in Germany with a beer hall putsch. It's called that because the attempted takeover was announced in a beer hall, and in Hitler's mind, the way it would work is Bavarian officials would join his cause, and through their leadership and through the leadership of General Ludendorff, who he recruited for this, the Nazis would march through the streets of Munich, and then the Munich government would fall, and the Munich police would join his cause, and they would announce there was a revolution, and the Nazis would take over, just like the Italian fascists took over. And that's not what happened at all. The Munich police opened up fire on the Nazis. Hitler was wounded, and he ran away. Nazis died. Eventually, he's arrested. He's put on trial for treason. That's exactly what he committed. But interestingly enough, Hitler saw his trial as a chance to spread his message. No such thing as bad publicity. And he becomes famous. And luckily for him, the judge was sympathetic to his nationalistic tendencies and only sentenced him to prison instead of being executed. And his time in prison wasn't even like prison. He was able to bring in his own furniture. Many of his fellow Nazis were in the same prison. They could leave his cell and come into his cell whenever he wanted. And he used one of his fellow Nazi prisoners as like his personal secretary. And people could come visit him. And it was prison light, basically. And while in prison, Hitler is going to put on paper his thoughts and ideas into a book titled Mein Kampf, means my struggle. And this becomes like the gospel of the Nazis. And you see everything Hitler is going to do if he is ever in charge. In Mein Kampf, he says Germany needs Lebensraum, living space, living room, that Germany needs to expand. And he said in Mein Kampf that Germany needs to take this Lebensraum from Eastern Europe, because in his mind, Eastern Europe is full of inferior races like the Slavs. He's a big fan of social Darwinism, applying survival of the fittest to human society. And in his mind, the Germans, what he called the Aryans, were a superior race. So they had the right to sweep across Eastern Europe and conquer it and fill it full of ethnic Germans. You also see his strong anti-Semitism. He blamed the Jews for essentially everything. It's their fault the depression happened. They created communism. It's their fault they lost the war. He contended that in the way back in the past, that the ancestors of the Germans were the Aryans, this master race. And they were amazing, right? But then they became polluted, in his words, because they married Jews, and it tainted their pure blood. And he said that's how the Jews get you, right? They pretend like they're part of your society, but they're not. The Jews are nothing but destructive. They're like a plague. They're like a disease, and they need to be eliminated. And he promised that if the Nazis were in charge, they would purify Germany of these inferior races. They would get that Lebensraum, and they would create a third Reich, a third German empire that would last 1,000 years. Now, the book was not a bestseller at first. It's quite horrid, actually. It's a poor read, and it's mammoth. It won't become a bestseller until after he's in charge. Then it becomes like the Nazi Bible. You would give it as wedding presents. People would even be married while holding their hand on top of a copy of Mein Kampf, like it was a Bible or something. But it's all laid out right there. What he would do if he was in charge, the conquering and the social Darwinism and the anti-Semitism.